There are moments in music history that feel bigger than a headline. Moments that leave fans wondering what was really happening behind the scenes. And when it comes to Snoop Dogg and Ice Cube, two giants who shaped the entire West Coast blueprint, there's always been a strange mix of respect, distance, and unspoken tension between them. For years, fans have whispered about it, not because of an explosive feud, but because something about their relationship never seemed fully explained. Why did two of the most influential voices of their generation cross paths so many times, yet never move as closely as everyone expected? Why did Snoop publicly praise Cube with so much admiration, yet the two often stayed on separate roads? And what about the moments people never saw? The private conversations, the quiet disagreements, the decisions that changed how they moved around each other. Today, we're finally going deeper, not into rumors of a typical rap beef, but into something far more personal. A truth shaped by inspiration, pressure, business, and the weight of being legends. Because behind every iconic smile and every chart-topping anthem, there's a story that rarely gets told. And this one might surprise you. What makes this story so surprising is that before there was any public connection between them, Snoop Dogg had already been shaped by Ice Cube's work in ways fans never really knew. Long before fame, before The Chronic, before the world even learned his name, Snoop was sitting in small rooms in Long Beach, listening to Ice Cube spit lyrics that felt like they were cut from steel. Cube's album Death Certificate didn't just impress him, it woke something up in him. That raw honesty, that fearless approach to storytelling, it lit a fire that pushed Snoop to sharpen his own voice. And that influence didn't fade over time. As Snoop started carving out his own lane, Cube's presence was always there in the background, like an older voice in the West Coast universe reminding him where the bar was set. Every rapper has someone they quietly measure themselves against. And for Snoop, Ice Cube was one of those names. It didn't create jealousy. It didn't create rivalry. What it created was pressure, the kind that forces you to rise or fall. But influence always leads somewhere. And in this case, it led to a moment fans didn't see coming. The moment their paths finally crossed face to face. When they finally met, the moment wasn't explosive, dramatic, or tense. It was more like two worlds recognizing each other. Snoop wasn't the superstar we know today. He was the hungry new artist, with the spotlight growing warmer by the day. Ice Cube, on the other hand, was already cemented as one of the sharpest lyricists on the West Coast. Their first real encounter wasn't a clash. It was more like a quiet acknowledgement. One legend in the making, crossing paths with one who had already made his mark. Cube saw something in Snoop early on. Not competitiveness, but potential. That laid-back swagger, the smooth delivery, the calm confidence, it wasn't like anything Cube had seen before. And while they didn't become best friends overnight, there was a mutual awareness that something big was happening in West Coast hip-hop. And they were both going to be part of it. Yet even with that early connection, there was always a distance. Like two planets orbiting the same sun, but never quite colliding. That distance didn't come from conflict. It came from timing, paths, and different worlds moving in parallel. Still, destiny has a way of forcing intersections. And eventually, their separate lanes collided in the most unexpected way. Through a collaboration nobody could have predicted. When the world first heard Go to Church, a 2006 track that brought together Ice Cube, Snoop Dogg, and Lil Jon, it felt like a rare moment where the walls finally dropped. The energy was loud, electric, and commanding. But underneath the hype, the collaboration told a more complicated story. This wasn't just two artists making a song. This was two giants acknowledging that even with years of distance, respect had never disappeared. For Snoop, stepping on a track with Cube wasn't just another feature, it was symbolic. It was him standing next to someone he once studied from afar. For Cube, bringing Snoop onto the record showed he recognized how far the younger rapper had come. The track didn't erase the years of mysterious space between them, but it reminded fans that their relationship wasn't defined by silence. It was defined by timing. And yet, even after this collaboration, the two didn't suddenly start appearing everywhere together. They didn't form a duo. They didn't start moving as a team. That same distance still lingered, almost like unspoken boundaries neither ever tried to cross. But respect can stay quiet for only so long, and eventually it resurfaced, this time in a way that revealed more than fans expected. Years after their collaboration, Snoop stepped forward with a statement that caught everyone's attention. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't staged, it was honest, maybe more honest than anyone expected. When Snoop called Ice Cube's No Vaseline one of the most powerful diss tracks ever recorded, he wasn't hyping a friend. He was acknowledging a truth he'd carried for years. That track, relentless and unapologetic, had shaped the rap world. And Snoop wasn't afraid to give Cube his flowers publicly. That praise revealed something deeper. Snoop never saw Cube as competition. He saw him as a pillar, someone who had carved out a lane so bold that every West Coast artist after him had to acknowledge it. And in doing so, Snoop pulled back a layer of the mystery surrounding their relationship. It showed fans that whatever distance existed between them wasn't coldness. It was simply two men navigating fame differently. But what made things even more complicated was what came next. A chapter that had nothing to do with music and everything to do with business. And that next chapter would pull their relationship into an entirely new light, one neither of them could avoid. What happened next didn't come from music, lyrics, or anything happening in a studio. It came from something far less artistic but far more real: business. And business has a way of revealing parts of relationships that music never could. When Snoop, Ice Cube, Too Short, and E40 formed Mount Westmore, fans thought it was the perfect moment, a super group representing the entire West Coast legacy. At first, it felt like a celebration, a victory lap for legends who had carried hip-hop on their backs for decades. But behind the scenes, things were nowhere near as smooth. A merchandising company stepped forward, claiming that the group, including Snoop and Cube, hadn't delivered on commitments for a massive 60-date tour, promotions, and exclusive merch drops. Suddenly, whispers around the industry began to grow louder. Not about anger, not about personal betrayal, but about miscommunication, missed expectations, and the inevitable messiness that comes when legacy artists try to do big business together. This wasn't the explosive drama fans look for. It was something more subtle, more uncomfortable. It created a quiet tension, the kind that doesn't start fights, but definitely changes energy. And if anything, it pushed Snoop and Cube into a space neither had planned for, facing the real-life pressure of turning respect into partnership. Yet, even with all that unfolding, something deeper was happening. Something about legacy, position, and the quiet weight carried by men who helped build a culture. When you're dealing with artists like Snoop Dogg and Ice Cube, you're not just dealing with personalities, you're dealing with legacies. These aren't rappers who came and went. They're towering cultural figures who shaped eras. And with that level of influence comes something most people never see: the pressure to protect what you've built, the pressure to move carefully. The pressure to choose your battles. That's why their relationship always had that quiet distance. Snoop and Cube never needed to compete for attention. They were too established, too respected, too foundational for ego battles. Instead, they moved in their own lanes, carrying their own histories. And when those lanes intersected, even briefly, it carried weight. But legacy can be both a blessing and a burden. It kept them from clashing, but it also kept them from getting too close. When two powerful forces stand beside each other, they don't collide by accident. They keep an intentional space between them, not out of animosity, but out of understanding. And as the business tension swirled, that space made even more sense. It became a protective boundary, a way to keep admiration intact without letting complications turn into conflict. Still, fans could feel it. Something unspoken lingered between them. And that unspoken layer would lead to the most surprising truth of all. By this point, the story seems tangled. Influence, admiration, distance, business, and legacy all pulling at their connection. But the truth behind what happened between Snoop and Ice Cube is actually much simpler than all the speculation. It wasn't a rivalry. It wasn't a hidden feud. It wasn't a buried disagreement waiting to erupt. It was two men navigating fame in ways that reflected who they were at their core. Cube has always been intense, strategic, calculated, the type who speaks when he needs to, not when the world demands it. Snoop has always been magnetic, open, easygoing, the type who can talk to anyone, anywhere. Their personalities were different. Their approaches to the industry were different. Their worlds touched, but never blended. So what really happened? They respected each other, but lived in separate lanes. They collaborated, but didn't try to force a brotherhood. They admired each other's work, but didn't need constant proximity. And when business added pressure, they handled it like professionals, not enemies. In the end, the story wasn't conflict at all. It was realism. Two icons who didn't need drama to validate their place. Two legends walking their own paths, but always recognizing the other's footsteps. And that realization leads to the only conclusion that truly fits. So after everything, the early influence, the quiet distance, the collaboration, the public praise, and the business complications, what really happened between Snoop Dogg and Ice Cube? The answer isn't loud. It isn't messy. It isn't something designed to start headlines. It's something far more grounded. Respect with boundaries. These two never needed to perform closeness for the cameras. They never needed to spark rivalries for attention. They understood each other's place in the culture. They appreciated the contributions each had made. And they kept things real. Not overly warm, not cold. Just real. Their story reminds us that relationships between legends don't always follow the patterns fans expect. Sometimes, the most powerful connections are the ones defined by distance, not tension, by mutual recognition, not constant collaboration, by unspoken respect, not dramatic declarations. And maybe that's why their dynamic has always fascinated people, because instead of a feud, we got honesty. Instead of drama, we got reality. Instead of explosions, we got two icons standing tall, side by side, without ever needing to stand too close. But despite all the health talk and whispers swirling around him, Willie's final reason for stepping away had far more to do with an emotional wound than any physical struggle. Something deeper was pulling him inward, and it all started with a loss he never truly recovered from. The most infamous moment came when the IRS seized nearly everything he owned, properties, possessions, even recordings, forcing him to rebuild from the ground up. That alone would have broken most artists. Yet Willie didn't crumble. He wrote, recorded, and toured with a determination that almost didn't seem human. But even after he cleared his debts, the lifestyle surrounding him never really changed. The industry kept demanding more. The schedules grew heavier, and the unspoken expectation was that Willie would always be available, always performing, always pushing forward. But even this wasn't the final reveal, because when Willie finally opened up at 81, what he shared wasn't about pressure or pain. It was about a truth he'd kept buried deep within, a confession that changed everything the world assumed about why he walked away.